Okay, good morning. Good morning. I hear my own echo in this room. Obviously, this is, you guys don't know anything about just-in-time in this industry, so we expect some people to be trickling in as the session goes. But we're going to kick off because, as Louis said, this conference is actually streamed live again. So welcome as well to our global audience who are tuning in from all corners. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Christopher Ludwig. I'm the content director for Automotive Logistics, as well as some of the other publications that we have within our sort of stable, including one called Automotive IT International, which sort of, this session, if you like, is a kind of collaboration between Automotive Logistics and Automotive IT International, looking at digitalization, IT, and technology across the supply chain. Digital transformation is obviously one of these terms that you can't escape in almost any sector right now, and the automotive perhaps least of all. We see it in the products, in the electronics going into vehicles, in automated driving, and connected car features, telematics. Looking, what was Brandon quote this morning? Mobility as a service, potential 1.3 or $6 trillion industry by 2030. So there's a lot happening in the business model, product side, but this is also being reflected across the supply chain and in operations. A lot of opportunity, whether that is in software and systems, whether that's in data analytics, which I think came up as the top day-to-day kind of impact for people in this room right now in our survey in the first session, whether it's the emergence of AI and machine learning and what that's gonna do in terms of supply chain optimization and planning, technologies like blockchain, etc. There's also a lot of barriers and risks along the way. How do we integrate this new technology with legacy systems, which many large organizations are obviously still working with? We can't just wipe those away. We need to integrate. There's cybersecurity questions. There's issues of trust. Who owns data? There's privacy issues. So, and not least of all, ROI issues and investment, right? So, who pays for it, and how quickly can we recover those costs, and what kind of risks are companies willing to take to move forward? And then coming to actually the headline theme of the whole conference, and certainly important to this discussion as well, is that human factor. So the skills and talent to move this forward, and also the impact that technology has on jobs, on existing roles. There's a lot of discussion and fear around jobs being lost. Although the reality seems to be, based on the surveys we do and the conversations we have, is sort of more for a need for more people and more talent right now. So, but either way, that human-machine integration and interface is so vital, because you can't design these systems in a vacuum. It's people who use them. It has an impact on the roles that people do, and that's some of the themes that we're going to pick up on in this session. We've got a great panel, and really pleased to have it. We're going to start with a keynote presentation from Raman Mehta, who's the Vice President and Chief Information Officer for Visteon. So Raman will speak, and then we'll do some Q&A with Raman directly after his presentation to pick up on some of the major themes. But then Raman will join the panel. We're also hearing from Srinivasan, who's the Senior Global Industry Strategies Director for JDA Software, and Gary Allen, who is the Chief Technology Officer and Vice President of Product Development at Ryder. So a good spread here of a major tier supplier going through some tremendous transformation, and what that means across the business, but also across, obviously, the supply chain, value chain, logistics, production, as we're discussing here, and also hearing from some key service providers and transport players here. We already had you download the app. You were interactive with. Please use that to ask questions if you like. I'll put them to our panelists. But stay engaged and interact, because this is your session. So it's now my pleasure to hand over the podium to Raman. We're really pleased Raman could join us. We're connected through Raman through, again, the Automotive IT International publication we spoke about, and Raman is really one of the thought leaders in this area. So I'm very pleased to give the podium now to Raman. Thank you.
Good morning, folks. We'll make the next 1 hour very interesting. You know, everybody carries a brand. The brand I'm working on of being hands-on. I want each one of you today, when you walk out of this session, what can you take to your work tomorrow? What did you learn today? What question can you ask to your IT team, to your business leadership, as to are we doing these things or not? We live in very, very interesting times. So I was talking to my daughter the other day, and she says, Daddy, you do a lot of fun things. What exactly you do? So I said, you know, the products that we are working today, remember I tell you to keep your hands on the wheels? The things that we are working on, I'll tell you to keep your hands off the wheel. That's the kind of world we are living in right now in terms of, you know, the things are changing, especially if you look at the automotive. Is automotive recall, the way we all remember, is that really a recall anymore? When you are sending the upgrades over the air, Tesla says, well, to us, nothing was brought into the vehicle, into the dealership. It's not a recall. So that's the rate of change we are working on. What I will do in next 15, 20 minutes, I'll walk you through how fortunate we've been at Visteon. So I joined Visteon a little year back. So what I'm going to describe to you today is the transformation journey that we've taken in just over 1 year. I had no choice. We had so much of technology debt. If you look at a lot of tier ones, a lot of OEMs, we had not invested in our technology for a number of years because of the bankruptcy, because of the cost pressures. So how do you come from that point where you have a level playing field? Today, the world is changing. I mean, is there really tier 1 anymore? We talk about NVIDIA. That's a tier 0.5. They are going directly to the OEMs. All the chip manufacturers have aspirations to play big time into autonomous. So we need to be up our game. We don't have the luxury to sit back, relax, and really step it up. So before we go in detail, here's a quick snapshot of Visteon. We are a $3.2 billion company, almost 10,000 people across the globe. We operate in pretty much each geography. We have 18 countries where we operate. We have a lot of engineering centers throughout the world. And the part that is very exciting is that market is seeing what we are doing, and it is reflected in our stock price over the last 2-3 years. Now, the way I see, there are 4 major trends that impact what's happening in autonomous. It has a direct impact on the supply chain. The definition of supply chains are completely changing. And I have one slide that I want you to all walk away with today, later during my presentation, where I have listed a few trends that I have witnessed myself in my day-to-day life, and how some of them are real and how some of them are on the edges. I tell my team, I joke with them that this is the best time to be a good CIO. On the flip side, this is the worst time to be an average CIO. So with that, let's go a little bit deeper. Now, what Visteon has done, in 2012, we were into a lot of businesses. We were doing the seating, we were doing the, the body, the air conditioning. We divested all of those businesses and started to become a pure play cockpit electronics starting from 2015. So today, pretty much every penny of our revenue comes from cockpit electronics. So think about being lucky, the right time at the right place. The whole world started to move towards electric vehicles, to the connected vehicles, and there we are owning that space from a cockpit electronics perspective. What we want to take this journey forward is to really from digital to autonomous. This is the space we want to play in, where we take our in-vehicle expertise, the relationship with OEMs that we have, and really transform it to autonomous driving. Now, this is where, in this story, IT plays a very, very critical role. IT people have been very good, traditionally, on figuring out the how part, Tell me a problem, and we are very good to fix it. But we were never invited to the seat of table, where, the board, the executives are meeting. That's where the what part gets figured out. So if you have to earn the credibility by doing what you're supposed to do, and then play into the innovations of the products that the company is making. So I actually put a very simple 3-step framework that we'll talk about and see how we took it from kind of an order taker, where now we are an integral part of our product roadmaps. So these are some of the products. If you drove your car this morning, probably chances are that you were looking at our instrument cluster, our infotainment, and the way the technology is moving. The consumer experience now, when you are playing on your iPad, you're doing your meetings, you want the same experience inside your car. And with this autonomous coming in, this cars will become a giant display theater where you're conducting your business. The boundaries between our work, our home will get completely blurred. And this is the future we want to live in. Now, how does this transformation come about? First of all, the biggest barrier was in automotive, everybody is focused on program mentality. Give a program, all our profitability, EBITDA calculations, delivery date are tailored for that program, as if we are working in silo. One of the challenges at Visteon was with the completely brand new management team, we put our thoughts together that we need to invest in platform thinking. Think of it, when you are making an IVI or a cluster, the large part of that ecosystem is platform-based. Your Bluetooth, your IVI, your Android stack is given. So if you can invest into the chipset all the way up and just leave the HMI that could be configured, that is the light bulb moment, right? But it requires a lot of culture change, innovations, mindset from the leadership top down, where they give you some latitude to build these platforms. So if you look at Visteon's backlog, today it's a public knowledge, we sit on almost $20 billion of forward business. How has that come about? It's basically come about by our commitment to platform thinking, because now we can leverage what we are doing and kind of make it customer specific where it adds the competitive advantage. So that's been quite a big journey, and IT has been an integral part of that whole journey. What is happening to us? Overnight, we became a technology company. It's not enabling. Technology is our business. We have almost 4,000 engineers right now who, before this, were more focused on the hardware, the boards, the PCBs, and suddenly the software component in our bill of material is exponentially increasing. How do you live with that mindset where you have to deliver software continuously? You have to deploy software continuously across the geography. And that's the only time you can have any chance of being successful at platform thinking. So IT, business, there were no boundaries. We all worked together. And then we also made a very conscious decision to put our China growth strategy. So today, 25% of our revenue is driven out of China. And believe me or not, China is really far ahead when it comes to autonomous. There are many, many OEMs who are really, really taking a lead in that. So that's the marketplace to be in. Now, what does it do to the suppliers? As suppliers, as the tier 1s, tier 2s, what's happening in Automotive 2.0? The biggest problem that we have is we need to start focusing on developing our own intellectual property. And then again, it gets intertwined with your IT strategy. How do you protect it? How do you ensure that digital rights are maintained appropriately? How do you ensure that you are putting those firewalls between customers, OEM, and the consumers? So there are a lot of challenges for IT and the suppliers to become Automotive 2.0 savvy. So what I did with that is I kind of took it to a next level. And I said, in my team, we will talk about a three-step framework. First of all, we need to get energized as the IT team. The backlog was such humongous that the IT team would like to kind of stay out of trouble. That was the mindset. And I said, the moment you have the mindset of staying out of trouble, automatically you are staying out of path of success. So we had to get some easy early wins, by looking at the efficiency problems, fix them. The second part of this journey was really getting into engagement. Now, engagement is a very, very overly used word. To me, engagement between IT and business is where you actually influence the process definitions, where you challenge with your knowledge that you need to go take your ERP, your sales system on the cloud, and at the same time, it's not a cost discussion. It's how do you rationalize your business. And if, as IT, you can bring that cost down, you've done your job. And once you've done these two things, then you get a shot at being the innovation partner to the business. So it's a kind of a circle that goes in. Unless you do the first two things, you will never be successful at really getting the seat that you need at the table. So that's very important for us. So what we did, we kind of put a 5-step process, kind of drop it down. And first of all, the first part of our journey was to harden our core, the infrastructure. Look at our network, look at our security, look at our service management, infrastructure, everything. That's a given. We got to make it work flawlessly. After that, we took some of the continuous improvement initiatives. How do you really bring a world-class HR system? Once you do that, business starts to turn head that, yep, these guys are really making my life easy. And then we went a little bit up the value chain where we changed how we integrate among different Visteon systems. How do we integrate and share data with our partners on the cloud? So we put the complete ERP and integration strategy. After that, we went into how do we expand into application lifecycle management? How do you do the product lifecycle management and put it together? And once you lay this foundation, you are getting ready to become part of the product innovation cycle. One of the examples I always talk about, today at Visteon, as I said, our journey last 1 year, when I joined, 95% of our internet traffic across those 20 countries was on those fat MPLS high fixed lines. Those are very expensive to maintain. They do not give you the flexibility. We took the risk and we went all in. And today, 95% of Visteon's traffic across the board between the sites to our Azure cloud goes on the public internet. So the internet has become our corporate network now. A lot of hard work that goes in. If you have a high blood pressure, I don't recommend it. Because for the network, there is no QA environment. There's no test. There's only one network. And you need a lot of support from your executives. I was fortunate. I reported to our CEO. He was right behind us. He was driving us. And the moment we fixed our network, we took some of these initiatives. So let me give you one example. Today at Visteon, all our 10,000 employees, we are on Skype worldwide. It changes the game. It changes the perception. And we not only went with Skype, we actually put some of these digital smart boards where engineers on a Skype call across the globe can draw from multiple locations at the same time. You do your meeting, the document gets saved, it comes into OneNote, and next time when you go, your meeting continues. Such a small investment, but people said, wow. And that's where IT comes into play. Sometimes you got to be willing to go small also, to declare some quick wins where there are the pain points and business can come back to you. After that, as I mentioned, we put a big, I say, very ambitious, aspirational project, which is very close to all the supply chain folks sitting here, is to define our product lifecycle management strategy. Today, we are very, very fragmented. Some of the things are into homegrown systems. Some are going through email workflows. When we do change notification between manufacturing and engineering, things get lost sometimes. The cost is there. The new product introduction is a big part of our cost. So with this project, which is still ongoing, we adopted the agile methodology, and we are working with business on what we call the concept of MVP. the minimum viable product, take it to business, and make it better and better with their feedback. The goal is one system for supply chain, for procurement, for manufacturing, where they can look at their CAD drawing, they can look at the volume spent across different geographies, the qualities, the program management, everything in one place with built-in workflow. Very, very ambitious, but that's the kind of stuff that we're talking about. And we are not talking 3 years. This is a project we want to deliver from start to finish in 15 months. Then, what I'd like to show are a few trends that I'm seeing that are taking shape. Some on the left, if you see, the blockchain as we talked about in the morning, the immersive technologies, those still have some more runway before they become applicable to automotive and supply chain. They're out there, they will be transformational, but I think if you look at the real problems that we are trying to solve, the latency that's there in the blockchain networks, it takes minutes to verify a transaction. And when we are running our supply chains, it's very, very time sensitive. It's going to be there, but keep an eye. The thing that really excites me is the artificial intelligence. Let me give you one example as to how the world is changing, And we live and breathe this every day. The autonomous driving will not be possible if we have to program every scenario into the software. It's not possible. You are merging into a ramp. There might be an aggressive driver. The weather might be bad. Sometime in your bad mood, your car is not picking up. You cannot program all those scenarios into a chip or in software. This is where some of the newer development that we are fortunate to play with, one of them is reinforced learning. That's how the humans really learn. There was an experiment 100 years back where they put a few cats into a cage and there was a lever. Cats figured out by hit and trial that if you press that lever, the door opens. That's how the human mind works. So with the reinforced learning, not only you have the cars, you have the environment and the other actors in the ecosystem. And you look at their reaction, look at the path that you take, the decision that you make. That's how Google solved the AlphaGo problem, by looking at the moves. We are very excited about this. We see a lot of use cases on machine learning on the plant floor, where you can look at all this manufacturing data, your plant maintenance, machine characteristics, and actually work on improving the first-time yield. Those things are all real and right in front of us. So I encourage you all to kind of talk to your teams and see where you can connect the dots with the newer technologies and the cloud platform, which are becoming absolutely affordable, where you can take this vast amount of data and run some of the training on the data. It's very, very important to start initiating a few projects from there. The thing that's also very interesting for this group would be 3D printing. In the new world, the raw material will be your digital files. You got a file, so no need to stock your shelves, nothing to hoard near the machines. If it's a simple part, you go, you print it right there. So from a global supply chain where things are getting logistically delivered, change fast forward, and everything is within the four walls of that plant. So those things are absolutely real. They're happening. If you don't catch on, if you're busy with your day-to-day life, you will miss the boat. And we've seen it happening. The barrier to entry these days is very much lowered. Somebody with an algorithm can come and sweep away your business. So what I would say is, at the end, to me, IT is like a pyramid, and most of us have solved these problems in a variety of ways. System of records, obviously we've done it. Now we are turning them into system intelligence, differentiation, innovations. To me, all of that is not very useful until we create business processes and the mindset that can help you create the system of impact. That's our journey, and I'll be here to take some more questions, and I'll hang around. Anytime you have any questions, feel free to buzz by me. Thank you.
Thank you, Raman. Thank you so much. I'll take that, yeah. Thank you very much, Raman. I think it was a fascinating presentation. So many topics to pick up from there. As mentioned, we'd like to open up some questions even immediately now for Raman, as well as joining in the panel later as a sort of keynote opening. First one, maybe from my side, actually, is talking in that this transformation you're describing, a 15-month integration of systems. Now, I imagine this has required a lot of work, cajoling with other departments across the company. I mean, how difficult a journey has that been to get the buy-in of the business units and other sides, whether that's in supply chain, production, logistics, or engineering, et cetera?
And that's a great question. That's #1 barrier. When I took this job, I said to my board and my executive during interview that technology is the easy piece. And they were all laughing. I said, no, I actually mean it, I was working at Oracle for a number of years, very good with all those things. It's how you sell. So the question you need to answer is not what's in it for me, what's in it for you. And the trick that I've learned is you need to, if you look at any IT resume that comes to my desk, everybody has a sentence called, we are the trusted advisor to the business. I just change the equation, and I find who are my trusted advisor in the business. So I go one level below the VPs, look at the people who are in the trenches and have a vision. You need to win them over. And the way we did was, we knew there were some very obvious problems where people were hurting, and nobody kind of took the holistic view of, let's put some investment there. And the one word that I'll let you all walk out with would be the credibility. You need to earn it. The moment you declare those wins, at the same time, you're going with the CEO, the board, and starting on some of these 2 or 3 programs that are delivering value in the longer term. So if you combine the two, I think you have a recipe for success.
And in terms of, has this required external investment as well? I mean, new systems, new providers coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another very interesting thing. You'll be shocked. Sometimes you have to be willing to spend less to get more. I mean, our infrastructure, we were so fragmented, but nobody wanted to touch that. And if you look at how much you are spending on help desk, and when I joined, I said, it's not help desk, it's actually a call center. Just call and nothing really gets resolved. But there was a fixed cost. But to change, sometime when we talk about, say, boil the ocean, I said, absolutely, why not? So you have to take a holistic look where you bring the partners who have done this thing before, and they have some success stories, they have some proven templates, and you put your governance, and then you change the game. So we had to bring a lot of new partners into the mix, yes.
I suppose it's a little bit more helpful to get buy-in from the board when you're saying we need to spend less.
That was the easy part on the left side.
Have you moved more to cloud-based ERP in this sense, or is that just one piece of equipment?
No, so I think we are still we had a very old ERP system. So our roadmap right now is to take the ERP on the cloud. It does 2 things for us. Number 1 is it will set us where we can get the uptake of the innovation that the product vendors are making. A lot of time this thing gets lost. I can bet half the people sitting in this room, we are saddled with old ERP systems, which are 2 or 3 versions behind. Now the problem is the vendor has been innovating. They are putting RFID, they are putting artificial intelligence into their demand planning, but you are so far behind that you're not able to take. So we are making that conscious effort. We are bringing on the cloud with the mindset that we will make some educated decisions. We'll fight those battles where we can rationalize our process. Why should we be so different in cutting a purchase order or matching 3-way invoices? That's simple. So we are fighting those battles, and that's kind of giving us a lot of elevation.
Well, specifically in obviously we're at a logistics event, so specifically in logistics, have you seen any particular low-hanging fruit that can be kind of optimized, improved from an IT and systems point of view?
So logistics, what I found was this whole IoT, it actually becoming a much bigger thing for us. We are able to send our demand signals a lot in a much more velocity than we were doing before. So the information exchange that was traditionally happening through EDI, which was clunky and which was had a lot of lead time, those things are becoming much, much more real time. And that, to me, is a very, very big advantage in our business.
Absolutely. Anybody have any questions at this time for Raman? And apologies, as Louis mentioned, the lights are bright, so it isn't so easy, so I might need help if anyone can see. I also see why Louis never thought there were hands up, even though there were usually quite a lot of hands up before. I think maybe one last point that I would just address to Raman, because then we'll have more questions that I want to get the group involved in after the presentations, is actually just to touch on the security, cybersecurity aspect of it, because I mean, we've seen disruptions now specifically in logistics, we've seen it in transport, we've seen it easy, massive things. So what are some of the key steps and processes that Visteon has taken to really secure its network?
Absolutely. When I look at security, we are not only looking at the infrastructure or platform security, all your end user devices, your servers, your network. We go way beyond, because we have to be focused on the product security, because the stuff that we are putting in the cars, it better be very, very secure. And one of the things that we are working on is consolidating these ECUs and bringing them together. Now, that is a big challenge from a security point of view. So we are looking at some of these modern tools with part of our infrastructure. One of the tools that I like very much is those SIM tools that can collect the events and logs from multiple systems and create a pattern and a trail out of it is something anomalous happening in your network. Second thing that we have to do, you got to be prepared. You got to have a playbook, because this is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Something will happen. We see these phishing attacks all the time. These people are becoming very, very smart. It's becoming a full-time industry now, They wait for months, they start to pry upon, find the weak links, and some of the emails that come out, they look as if they actually came from a high-level executive. And chances are people will click on those. So how do you be proactive about training and educating people, making part of your DNA? But what happens if there's an incident? After all your tooling, all your investment, how do you contain that part of the problem is the key for us. Yeah. And we do a lot of these simulations where we actually put a stopwatch and say, hey, who I called, did the guy respond, what did I do, how much time it took me? We are very, very almost paranoid about security as a whole.
Well, as they say, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you, right? So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I want to thank Raman for that. So now we have a chance to move through the supply chain a bit more, perhaps a bit into the trenches and some of the front lines of logistics. And so I'm happy to invite Gary Allen, the CTO and Vice President of Product Development for Rider System.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you. All right, I guess I'm in the trenches. Can everybody hear me okay? Who else is in the trenches? Who's a 3PL in this room? How many 3PLs do we have here? Yeah, we are definitely in the trenches. I'll agree with that. Raman, great presentation. I'm going to cover, it's not much of I don't want to go through a commercial around Rider, but I do want to touch on the journey we're going through as well. But more or less, I want to kind of leave everybody in the audience with a few different points, things to think through within your organizations. Ryder is more than a trucking company. Actually, this year is our 85th anniversary, so we've been around a long, long time. Our founder, Jim Ryder, started our company in 1933 with one truck that cost $35. So we've grown over the years. And recently, really in the last 2 to 3 years within Ryder, we're trying to transform what we do. And we have a lot of legacy systems. We'll talk through some of those challenges. But our network alone is made up of our customers, right? So we have a lot of trucks on the road. We have over 240,000 vehicles. We got 800 plus shops. We got thousands of technicians. We got thousands of drivers. We have hundreds of warehouses with almost about 40 million square feet under roof. So we have a lot of assets that we can leverage, and we'll kind of talk through what we're doing around that. But it's not only assets physically, it's also people as well as systems. And in that journey, which we're still very early on, one of the biggest challenges that we have is how do you harness all the data? And we'll talk through that. We definitely have challenges around kind of the legacy systems, but not only our systems, oftentimes it's our customer systems. Because in our facilities, in a warehouse, maybe running transportation, it's just not our systems. So there are a lot of challenges we'll talk through and kind of the things that we've done to address those. This morning we talked about a lot of these things. I'm not going to cover every single thing. Raman also talked about it as well. The fun thing in this space is everybody cares about supply chain and logistics now. Even the younger kids, although they don't care about driving a truck or operating a forklift, they're really excited around logistics and supply chain, mostly from a technical perspective. I think a lot of the Google activities, the Amazon effect, the Uber effect, the mapping, the autonomous, but more around the technology in this space is really, really exciting. We're partnered with a few different companies, accelerators out in Silicon Valley. In fact, I'm heading back out there next week. There are 1 million startups in this space. So it's really fun to be in this space, but it's really, really confusing around who's doing what and what do you tackle first. So it is exciting times. Disruptions are becoming the norm. You know, we'll talk about technologies. I think automotive, certainly when you get into robotics, when you get into artificial intelligence, the automotive industry is certainly leading the way in many areas around that. Logistics is behind. But that's the next opportunity for all of the providers in this room, as well as, you know, the OEs and also suppliers, is logistics is not too far behind. And in fact, if you look at what we do in this field, we should be able to automate a lot of what we do a heck of a lot easier than making stuff. And so we'll kind of talk about some of those things to consider. Part of our journey within Ryder was we were born as a 3PL. A lot of what we do is around our customers. We manage things as projects. We win a piece of business, whether it's General Motors and we're doing a startup, or it's Visteon and we're launching it was project-based orientation. And we've grown around our customers in this industry over the last 3 decades, but it's shifting. How can we invest ahead of the need? How do you structure an organization to invest in products, invest in research, actually build out capabilities before we win a new piece of business? And that's what we're doing too. But it's product thinking. Raman talked about platform thinking. It is kind of both, right? It's how do you think about the tools, products, capabilities you build before the need? And that's an important piece to remember, that it's not just project-based. This morning we had Lyft up here, and yeah, everything's moving to shared economy. Within Ryder, we just launched a new product called Coop, which is an asset share for our vehicles. So we are getting into the truck sharing environment, but it's not only trucks, it's warehousing. You got Flexi out there. You got a lot of assets that we can leverage collectively, whether it's our assets or our customers' assets. And that shift is going to continue, whether it's the freight, whether it's the asset piece. The internet, the open source, Raman talked about it. It's a cultural change. The interesting thing is, because of all the visibility of data information, which we're still evolving across the supply chain, it exposes a lot of weaknesses or opportunities, the way I look at it. But everybody in that network can be exposed, whether it's how we track compliance around in-transit shipment for proactive ETA is changing. We're not relying on EDI anymore. We're relying on APIs and directly connecting into a GPS. But even us, we're struggling through what is the right way to calculate proactive ETA. It's far different than it used to be, where we had really stagnant or latent data, and now it is real time. The need for speed. The thing that keeps me up at night, besides the people side of our business, is we're not moving fast enough. Because of the technology, our customers are changing really quickly. We need to keep up the pace. The other thing is, oftentimes we look internally, we got to look at our end customer. It's all about the experience. And the experience could be user internally, but I'm thinking about the end customer, is how do we as a provider or this industry make our customers' lives better? How do we help them do their job every single day? How do we make it easy? Because it's very, very complex in what we do. And then last piece is there's huge advancements. I mean, we're going to talk about AI a little bit. Raman talked about the IoT. The sensor technology is real. It's easy. It's cost effective. I'd say the data side of it is difficult. APIs, we lack standards. I've been talking to a few other colleagues on the OE side, is how do we develop standards in this industry? Focus on automotive. We got AIAG. We got these groups. We do need standards as it advances around, whether it's IoT or APIs, what have you. So some of the challenges I think that we all go through every day. First is, how do we align our strategies, our vision of what we're trying to do? I mentioned the product versus project approach. The other thing is internally. And internally, both on our customer side or us, is how do we remove the bureaucratic processes that we have around approvals, or hiring a person, or getting a new product approved, or going through the budgeting process, being a publicly traded company, to worry about the impact on earnings per share. There's a lot of internal processes that really slow us all down that we need to reevaluate. The other thing across our supply chain, we have a ton of stakeholders. Frankly, in the automotive supply chain, I think it's more complex than anyone else. Maybe tech is close behind it, but you have thousands and thousands of stakeholders, whether it's source of supply, whether it's 3PLs, logistics providers, manufacturers. It is a really, really complex supply chain. The shift from waterfall, I mean, Ram was talking about it, we are moving our entire IT organization towards an agile approach. And as Raman said, it's not just IT and the engineering side, it's around the business, the product side, but then we often forget the experience side. And there's really a three-legged stool around how to do agile on products that everybody needs to think through. The last, next piece down is data. What's happening with all the IoT data, the sensor data, it's a ton of either unstructured, structured data, whether videos, whether real-time traffic alerts, whether it's a sensor on a truck, sensor in a warehouse, tracking an asset. The complexity around the data side is tremendous, and it's not going to get any easier. And so a lot of our focus is what element on the data side do you take to structure it so you can actually do something with it. I mentioned the standards first, the legacy systems, those aren't going away. Our strategy on the legacy system is to leave them there. Some of them will try to sunset, but the reality is our customers have legacy systems. So our strategy is how do you build a neutral platform that leverages the data so you can connect into anything? And that's what everybody's thinking about. That's a platform to me, but how do you do that internally as well as support your customers around that? And then how do we simplify the whole thing? We talked about artificial intelligence. Raman did a little bit. We are actively doing, I'd say, beyond pilots and projects. If you think of robotic process automation, it's pretty easy to do. From a logistics standpoint, if you have anything that's somewhat repeatable, higher volume, manual intervention, so if you think of like transportation management and somebody's keying, you know, a status call or a call check, or you're trying to manage documentation, RPA is a really easy thing to plug in, and it doesn't require you to change out your legacy systems at all. Right? So we're working with companies like Kapow, AVRL's playing in the automotive space, but it's really easy to layer it on. Think of just automating workflow around RPA. The thing that we're playing around with is the thing on the right, is getting into more advanced AI, more of the augmenting. There's a study that McKinsey has out there around AI. If anybody hasn't read it, you know, their estimates are there's about 49% of the job activities out there that we pay people to do that could be automated. But then there's other industry analysts that say that's great, but out of 49%, you're really only going to automate about 9% of those. So in the end of the day, people aren't going away. AI should make our jobs easier, whether it's on a shop floor in a plant, whether it's behind a computer, managing transportation, whether it's in a warehouse and trying to automate what we do around workflow and eliminate paperwork. There's a lot of new tools and advancements around AI, and it is real, and it's really, really cool stuff. The other last piece I'll mention is anytime you have a call center, we talked about kind of a help desk as a call center, a lot of those are automated today. We're starting to use bots for some of our home delivery, but the integration of bots with a human is really, really critical. And so it needs to kick out and eventually touch a human, at least in the short term. As far as just the approach going forward, I mentioned data. And I think this is probably a McKinsey slide too that I lifted. It is really complex, right? Around what do you start with? And that is always a thing that we go through around try to prioritize what we're going to work on, what we're going to plan for, how many new products, you know, how much can we take on in a given year. But I like this slide from a thinking perspective around trying to prioritize and how do you manage data, because AI won't really work, machine learning doesn't work well if the data coming in is a mess and it's unstructured in many different ways. But really, start with the business problem. Raman said it earlier, around what is the business problem we're trying to solve for, and start small. Don't try to tackle everything. Don't try to re-architect every single platform or legacy system you have out there, but pick a few business problems you're trying to solve for. And then the data ecosystem too is just break down all the data. I mean, we have many, many systems because in our warehouse business as an example, because so many of our sites we use our customer systems, we have 30 plus instances of WMS. And it's all different data models and data structures. So it's extremely complex around how do you standardize that across everything you do. On the transportation side, it's a little bit easier, but then when you get into manufacturing value-added services, it gets really complex. So how do you break those down into different silos? And then how do you aggregate the information and then standardize it and then structure it properly? The other piece is there's a million tools out there. I mentioned the fun aspect about our business is all these startups, but there's a tool and everybody gets tool crazy and happy. And at the end of the day, just pick one or two and go with it. The good side of it is on the data side, whether you're dealing with moving to the cloud with Amazon, AWS, or Azure on the Microsoft side, there's a million tools out there. And they're getting easier to use. They're getting more cost effective. Most of them are moving in the cloud. We are moving our products all to the cloud as well, which is pretty scary for our IT guys. They're freaking out about that, but I think they've gotten over the initial hurdle. But pick one, don't get tool enamored, right? And you're going to be flipping tools, and within my organization, people get frustrated because, hey, we picked a provider and now we're going to switch out 1 year later, 6 months later, and I'm like, I don't care. We're going to keep picking tools and providers because it's going to continue to change. The workflow integration is really important too, right? So how do you make sure you automate what you can, but then how do you manage the tasks and the workflow down at the individual level as well? And then the last piece is the culture side of it. I mean, if we don't address this, to Raman's earlier point, it doesn't matter what tool you pick. It really doesn't. One, it's getting alignment, but two, it's just changing behaviors and getting people to want to organize as one group, want to work together, and not camp out in the background. So there's a lot of things to think through. This is just kind of a guideline that everybody can think through. And then lastly, I'll just leave this before we get into the Q&A, and then Srini's going to get up here. The thing that we focus on is what not only problems we're trying to solve for, what waste, what excess do we have across our network or our customers' network that we can target. And so that's one of our starting pieces that we focus on. And then I mentioned the data, the integration, visibility. We've been working on a new product that we call RiderShare, which I would call it more transparency. Part of it is visibility of everything we do across our network, but it's transparency and it's collaboration. And by transparency, what I mean is not only where stuff is, whether it's an asset, shipment, inventory, it's who is doing what to whatever shipment or action and why, what's the intent. And so you think about workflow and automating events and so forth, just something to think through around managing your network. And the next piece down is how do we develop standards? I think as an industry within auto, we need to take it on. I mean, it starts simple, maybe APIs or IoT, and we start with that. I think as a group in an industry, we need to think through that and take that action on, and then leverage the strength of our network. And then the last piece I'll leave everybody with, just 4 key themes that we tend to focus on. I mentioned our RiderShare product is around transparency. It's trust too. And this is trust in the data, because one of the issues is if you don't have trust in the data and the data is not accurate and it's sending up a lot of false signals, nobody's going to believe it, nobody's going to use it, nobody's going to participate in it. So trust is key, as well as collaboration. We have a lot of capabilities across the automotive industry, so how do we work together? How do we create kind of a broader network? And then the last piece is how do we customize it or personalize it? Not necessarily customize it, but how do we make the experience unique to a customer persona or a truck driver or somebody in the warehouse or somebody performing their job to make it unique to what they do? So those are just a few thoughts to think through, and then we'll go into the Q&A here after Srini. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Gary. Thanks a lot, Gary. We may have started the presentation saying you were in the trenches, but clearly Ryder's going over the top here, I think. So it's good to see this toolkit and this change of thinking and the process described there, all very interesting. And I think it was an interesting kind of continuation, if you like, of some of the themes that Ram was also addressing. A lot of that's going to come back, I'm sure, in the Q&A around standards and trust and culture, and also the human-machine side as well. But before we go to, there's a warning, can we ask presenters to stay in the live? Okay, sorry, there was an internal message that was coming up on the screen there. I got thrown by it for a second. We've got one more presentation from Srini Srinivasan from JDA. So Srini, the presentation stage is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hate to go last, especially when you have 2 good presenters with great content preceding you. So the risk of not having to repeat what they have already said, here I am. I want to take you through a time travel. 100 years ago, probably the same place, Henry Ford remarked, any customer can have a car painted in any color that he wants as long as it is in black. 100 years fast forward to now, we have a different context. Here's Dieter Zetsche, chairman of the board of Daimler, who has a completely different opinion of where we are today. He is talking about the dichotomy in the automotive industry, the coexistence of ICs and ICs. I mean the internal combustions and the integrated chips that is taking over, dressing up the automotives today. He is talking about people who want to drive for driving pleasure. We could even question if there would be driving licenses down the line. And the cars, the so-called mobility as a service. And then we are talking about sharing economy. What's interesting here in these two different point of views is both had a common vision, a vision around customer centricity, the vision around understanding what that end consumer wanted. Interestingly, however, that very context of customer centricity has changed over the past 100 years. The days of industrial revolution gave rise to the universal car, the car that can be produced in masses for a good lot of people out there. In the age today of digital revolution, we are here to talk about personal mobility. You see the context here. Speaking of which, I think I should start saying cars as cars because to me, it's nothing but computers on wheels. Taking a leaf out of what Raman just said. If you take a car today and start dissecting it, you will start noticing today and in the days to come, there is immense high-techization of the components of the car that we are seeing today, to the extent that we could call saying a car or any automotive asset out there to be one of the most expensive consumer electronic product. And I wouldn't be surprised if I have to say it that way. And there is a significant transition from the propulsion systems, as Brandon was saying this morning, looking at it from adoption in the IC engines to the adoptions where all the tier 0.5 suppliers are coming into play, the so-called integrated chips. An automotive company is not alone. Every company today is starting to think of themselves as a technology company. In fact, Raman calls it a software company, one step even further down. Domino's can be the Netflix of pizzas. It considers itself a technology company happening to make pizzas. Shift gears to a different industry in fashion retailing. Under Armour calls itself a technology company happening to sell digital health and fitness products. Transition again to Unilever, one of the largest consumer products company as we've known historically, is calling itself a technology company focused on consumer value. Again, to correct myself, not consumer products, consumer value. Now, I wouldn't be surprised in the days to come, there would be someone out here in this room to call themselves a leading technology company happening to sell computers on wheels or mobility services. In that race for technology, and the theme of the presentation today and the whole conference is all about human factor, when technology becomes a fascination, the human capital becomes an afterthought. And to me, and I'm a technology provider, I've been in the industry, I work for JDA, been with the industry for 90 years, a leading digital supply chain planning and execution solutions provider. So that aside, coming from the technology background, I can still say technology is only so much important as long as it can add A, business value, to the point that Gary and Raman made, and number two, it fundamentally needs to add value to the society that we live in. In that context, and purely taking a leaf out of my experience working across the automotive ecosystem, be it automotive OEMs, tier ones, or logistics service providers, I can confidently say today that today mobility, not mobile devices, is the new platform for innovation. Let me elaborate. I think there's a fair amount of people who would represent the different lines of the automotive system here. I would say OEMs, tiers, 3PLs, including aftermarkets, to name a few. If I am an OEM, or if I'm a tier 1 supplier, I need to start worrying about the supply chain of one. Talk about the fully dressed cars. The question that I need to worry about is the car that this consumer is going to buy hyper-personalized? Because mobility is not about a locomotion from point A to point B. It is about a holistic, personalized experience that I am going to get from that asset. Shifting hats, if I am a logistics service provider, or if I'm servicing tier 1s or OEMs, to me, data is the new oil. As Gary was mentioning, data is the new currencies, cryptocurrencies of supply chain, because to me, it is not just about visibility, it is also the ability to manage risks in the supply chain. Because let me tell you one thing, the highest spend across the supply chain, end-to-end, name a sub-industry, comes from the freight services. So it's not just the automotive industry. LSP is scrambling their heads to figure out how they can improve or support bottom line impacts to the automotive spectrum. The third one is, interestingly, aftermarket as well, because the roles of dealers, the roles of retailers is all soon changing. They will continue to exist in the marketplace as long as they can bring value-added services, A, to the businesses out there, B, to the consumers out here. And that's where I call accessorization the S with a dollar, because there would be continued personalization of these assets that are sitting on the field out there. And now these could be assets that are owned, or these could be assets that are leased as a service. With that kind of disruption being the new norm, the thinking of supply chain ought to be different. It is no more the traditional linear way of solving the problem with the linear supply chain constructs. You got to be thinking differently from a supply chain perspective. Speaking of IT, I would call this an integrated digital supply chain transformation. I want to go back, take a step back from technology once again. If I were putting myself in your shoes, automotive OEMs, tiers, or aftermarket players, what is that $100 million problem that I need to be solving today? What is that big pebble in my shoe that I need to remove? I see three different things, and primarily I get these three different things based on my conversations with the marketplace, with the customers. The first one, inherently, is revenue risk tied to the top line. And why do I say this? And I say this because the market today is very fragmented. There is the dichotomy in the supply chain from a consumerism perspective. We've got another 10 years when the market will completely convert itself from an IC, internal combustion-led propulsion systems, to fully autonomous supply chains. So there is going to be this micro-segmentation of needs in the marketplace to hold the assets, the different sizes of fleet, the different sizes of cars, the need for transportation as a service, the need for personalized cars. These will continue to exist. So you cannot start looking at volumes that are being sold from a one-size-fits-all approach. Clearly, a data point out here is Toyota has already started investing over $500 million in Ubers. That's one single data point. Speaking of bottom lines, high inventory to sales ratio. I would be preaching to the choir, because this is a metric that most of you will care about, even if you're a dealer or a tiers or an OEM. And this is another interesting metric where I want to start focusing on the bottom line. Because if I take a word out of Marcus Schaefer from Mercedes-Benz, he's totally into digitalization of factories and plants. For a minute, he's talking about agile production. So on one hand, you're talking about the top line, where you want to start getting into business segmentation. On the other hand, companies, automotive companies and tiers are starting to look at how to watch for the bottom line and digitize the factories. The third one, which Gary was bringing up to as well, is what I would call the supply chain risk visibility. Just to call out, bring back the memory, a single fire incident at Meridian Lightweight Technology Company caused an immense shortage of magnesium casting parts, which at Ford in their quarterly earnings call said it costed them 12 to 14 cents per dollar per share. Things like these, or be it flood or fire or any disruptive event as they happen, is extremely important for the entire supply chain ecosystem to know, not based on when they happen, but also predictively understanding what might happen so you have alternates. Now, putting these all together, you have the business context, you have the $100 million problem. We know technology is important, software is important. Where digitalization comes into play, it comes into play because it gives you the advantage and it's diminishing the barriers of entry. It gives you the point of leverage. For a minute, I'm talking supply chain economics here. I'm not talking point of sale. It's a point of leverage. Brandon was making a good point out there this morning. It is all about, if I have the asset today, how could I do, or how could I look at all possible commercialization of that asset, whether it's on the road running, whether it's sitting on my parking lot, or whether it's on a garage, or whether it's on a yacht. This could be a personalized car. This could be a car meant for FTLs and FTLs for intraday transits. Speaking of which, that digitalization gives you an advantage of 3 different kinds of scaling. The scale of manufacturing. This is really where a tight, vertically integrated supply chain is important with your end-to-end stakeholders, not a transactional relationship, especially with your contract manufacturers, JVs. And I'm so happy that Raman brought a point of 0.5 suppliers, tier suppliers. 0.5 denotes that the tier 1s and tier 2s are no more transactional in nature. They are embedded in the design as a spine and brain of your automotive product. The second one is scale of communication. Gary brought this out. It is all about predictive analytics based on big data, data lakes out there. The question is, it is not just data anywhere. What can I take how can I use the data? How can I turn that into insight? And how can I bring an actionable intelligence out of the data that's sitting out there? The third one, most importantly, is a scale of reach, because this is where I'm talking about the commercialization element, be it connected cars, or be it IoTs, or be it IIoTs, industrial IoTs, so to say. That's where JDA comes in, because that's all we've been doing for the past 35 years. It's all about enabling, leveraging that information from the edge, the depth and comprehensiveness of supply chain capabilities to optimize and create a plan that's going to make you all enable profitable responsiveness in a company or grow your profitable gross margins. What's important here is, again, we're not alone. We work with partners in crime out there, like Googles of the world, like Fokites of the world, who brings in real-time visibility. It's ingest the data from the edge, use AIs and ML paradigms to go all the way from network strategy. Talk about tariffs. We need to start looking at total landed cost sourcings and optimizing your entire supply chain design based on these market dynamics out there, all the way from integrated business planning to forecasting, dressing up your fully dressed, unique cars. I mean, today we are sitting in a North American automotive industry. We are sitting at Boolean logics of 200 to 400 plus features and options combinations, and creating that forecast order is an immensely hot task. It's a black box. But you can do better with AI and ML, and I can come back and say, this consumer out here in this demographic is going to buy a certain kind of a car with certain kind of dressing. That's where I'm talking about from a forecasting perspective. And taking it all the way to digital factories, digital transportation, including warehouse management, digital warehousing, tasking, and labor management. Because one of the most difficult challenges that automation, transportation industries, and warehouse industry face today is a labor turnover. So got to keep that in mind. So that's from my end. We have the booth out there. One of the low-hanging fruits that you all can take advantage of is the concept of control tower. And by control tower, I do not mean just an exceptions management platform. It is that orchestrated, collaborative, visibility, and actionable intelligence platform that Gary was talking about. It's interesting to follow both of them. It's even more better, happier when they both happen to be your customers. So that's a different happenstance out here today. So we are more than happy to share that details with you. Closing the loop on the human factor, right? This is not a game of men versus machines. We've been talking for the past 15 years about stakeholder collaboration, trading partner collaboration. But I'll take that one step ahead. I would say there is going to be a need for cyber-human collaboration. There is a need for both these places. It is inhumanly possible for us to go and look at scale and speed of what machines can do today. So when it comes to robotic process automation that Gary was talking about, and Raman was talking about, when it comes to MLs and AIs, prediction, prescription, leave that to the machines. But where we will come today as human capital is when we start empowering our people, when we treat supply chain as a boardroom topic, when we take this as an elite, empowered decision-making organization for vision, creative engineering, communication, more importantly, bot management. Thank you.
Thank you, Srini. Thank you very much, Srini. Another great presentation. Even if it means that in, I don't know, maybe automotive logistics 2028 will be a room full of cyborgs, but actually, no, I'm sure actually, as a great point at the end about the integration and working together with your people and the technology and systems that you're bringing in. Again, 3 great presentations, all giving some roadmaps, if you like, towards digital transformation, to how connecting the supply chain more to technology and IT. And I think we've got some great insight there. I would now open the entire panel, if you like, to Q&A. So we have microphones going around the room. If you can put your name, stand up, and say company before you ask the question. We will, of course, address it. Anybody have a question that they would like to put to our panel? You don't get to lunch sooner, I'm afraid, by trying to bail out on questions. Okay, perhaps we can pick up on the point that Srini sort of touched upon at the end, and what Gary also brought up around the human-machine interface, if you like. I mean, in some ways, the fear in the media, at least, is sort of around job losses, right? Automating people away. And if you believe some of the statistics on AI, it could be 30, 40, 50% of jobs. But your points seem to be much more around integrating into the workflows and systems we have today. You know, how do you see this developing over time? I mean, is this, maybe starting with you, Srini, where do companies need to focus now in terms of improving this integration?
Your question, let me understand your question. Your question is, we see a lot of data points in the market today where there's a job loss, machines taking over, and how do I see it? I see it in 2 ways. On one hand, we talk about labor shortage, the trucking sector, driver sector, warehousing, etc. On the other hand, we exactly talk about machines taking over. I think job loss is real, where machines can take over, especially when there is repeatability of tasks. Like I said, it is humanly impossible to match up to the speed and scale that machines can do today. Whether it's RPAs, robotic process automation, or anything that is tied to MLs and AIs. The only way people can embrace this is there is a fundamental skill set gap in what is being taught out there and what the new market is going to be expecting of us. So I see this, the new beginning is embrace it, embrace machines, start improving skill sets. It is all, I heard this somewhere where people always look at once you learn, when you learn, you don't work. When you work, you don't learn, right? We can't go with this dichotomous thinking. There is a constant learning process for all of us, and the skill sets will continue to change, and the only way we can embrace the accelerations of missions and automation in the industrial sector is understanding it and be able to babysit those bots, which is why I put this in a very funny way, that those bots cannot live by itself. they've got to be almost even more than adult babysitting. So my answer to that is start to build the skill sets, the right skill sets that the company will be expecting you of, because those skill sets are not about data plumbing. Those skill sets are about making right decisions for the company and down the line, right contributions for the society. I hope I answered your question.
Let me add to that, what Srini just said. So let me throw a very practical example. So today there's a big shortage of the the truck drivers, right? And by law, they cannot drive more than 60 hours a week, and at a stretch, not 11 hours at one time. So now the new concept, so we talk about this changes. None of these changes are kind of a step up that you wake up in the morning and we're all autonomous. It's going to be a gradual path. So in the trucking industry, with platooning, right, where you have trucks follow each other, it's going to be a great improvement in truckers' life. There'll still be a man or woman behind the wheel in the platoons, but then now they're free to do something else while the truck is driving. And you start gaining the efficiencies of the fuel, right? Because the wind drag goes down. So there's going to be a big journey by which we come to that. And during that time, there'll be a whole lot of new business models that we have not even thought about. So in my mind, I think this is going to be an exciting time. And it's a time for all of us to reskill and look for how the nature of work is going to change entirely.
Yeah, I'll just add to it as well. I think you summarized it nicely. I don't view it as replacing. I view it as augmenting. And if we look at our business, we can't hire enough truck drivers, right? And so we are actively working on the platooning as we speak. We're engaged on autonomous trucking, all the alternative vehicles. So my view is we have to do this to augment the shortage we have in our business. And then the younger workforce, they are open to testing and trying technologies as well. I'd say the older workforce, there's some level of challenge there, but it is a cultural thing, is you have to test and you have to deploy it. But I view it as augmenting and assisting and making the jobs better and easier. And if you don't start testing and piloting, you're not going to be able to address the whole cultural piece. But I view it as augmenting. I don't see the shortage in truck drivers or warehouse workers going away anytime soon. And we have to embrace the technology to help close that gap.
There's also, as the workforce ages as well, there's areas of the technology which comes in and plays an important role as well. Srini mentioned that favorite Silicon Valley term, ecosystem, and Gary talked about working with startups and new sorts of companies. I wonder, with this sort of infusion of new kind of companies that we're getting involved in, some of whom don't have perhaps the history and of working in the automotive industry with the kind of processes, timelines, approaches that we're used to, is the sort of nature of partnership changing, or does it need to change? I mean, it's a sort of broad question. It would be different perhaps for each of you.
I think we need a lot more cross-pollination in the automotive industry. That's number one. But technology is a great normalizer, because what technology can do to you is because technology is not just a sub-industry oriented. Yes, there are sub-industry variations, but what technology can do to you is help cross-pollinate or accelerate that cross-pollination, take the best-in-class practices, or theoretical best practices, let me not just say best-in-class, and start helping adoption of those leading ones in other industries, especially the automotive industry. And when I say automotive industry, I'm including the end-to-end spectrum, all the way from tiers to finished goods, finished vehicles assembly, and the distribution of it.
Yeah, I mean, my only add too, I guess it is. I view it as a collaboration effort, right? And I don't know if the partnership approach has changed. I mean, the complexity is there's so many startups, right? So trying to peel through what's real or not is a bit of a challenge. But I mean, I think in the automotive industry, we've started working together a heck of a lot closer, right? So I do think the whole collaboration, smaller trials, testing, piloting, just moving faster together without creating some monolithic, organization that's just not going to be fast enough. So I don't know if partnership's changing. I think the technology is probably driving us to change how we work versus, dealing with, startups differently.
And 15 years ago, we would always say technology follows processes, right? I mean, that is still true to some extent, but I would just say technology today can help accelerate the adoption and adaptation of processes that are now found in other industries as well, into the automotive industry.
Raman, you talked about the minimum viable product, sort of getting to that level much faster and being more agile around that as well.
Absolutely, yep. And I think that's the mindset. I think as Gary said, it's a kind of win-win right now. They bring their strengths. We have a heritage of automotive safety. You know, some of the partners we work with, they don't even know how to spell ASIL, which is kind of bread and butter for most of us, right? So we bring that rigor, and they bring some of the modern, quick, you know, fail fast kind of mentality, and you mash them together. And I think it's a great combination to, you know, really improve what I call the quality of life on the planet. I mean, if we can solve the problem of autonomous driving, I mean, that boat, that tide will lift so many industries as a byproduct. So I think there's a lot to be done together, not to be, you know, kind of playing into our own shells. It's the time to kind of open up and form these relationships.
Mm-hmm. Any comments, questions from, oh, here we have a question on the left here. Ruud is probably tall enough he didn't actually need to stand, but thank you.
Thank you. My name is Ruud Vossenbelt from Inform. I worked in ERP software companies and supply chain management software companies. I see here we have people from supply chain software companies, people who think about ERP solutions. Where do you think that the world is going? Is there still a future for ERP, or need the technology come from a different area? Is there still a future for SAP and Oracle? Who are the leader in 10 years' time in technology? Maybe the panel has some ideas on that.
I think Raman should go first. You guys should go first.
Just go down the line.
What I would say, there's definitely a play, you know, but they need to change with the changing requirements, right? You cannot live in a 12-month product cycle upgrade, you know. Things are changing way too fast on our side. To me, the winners will be who understand the process very, very well and have the framework where you can actually configure the process to be the best in class for that industry. The second differentiator would be the one who owns the business intelligence space. That's where they've been traditionally weak, you know. You always have to have different systems. The movement on that front is very, very fast in terms of, you know, amalgamating data from different sources, whether it's your sensors on the plant floors, your supply chain signals. How do you really create a cohesive architecture which has built-in hooks through APIs and solving the problem across the board of the visibility with data lakes and some advanced analytics are the winners. Otherwise, probably they'll become history.
Yeah, I guess my only adds, and I agree with all of that, I think the whole flexibility is key. I mean, but you know, SAPs and the Oracles and even JDAs, they are well entrenched in the industry. So, I mean, one of the challenges, how do you re-architect your platform to make it more flexible? And it's not only the system and the platform, it's how you approach it from an agile perspective. But I don't see them going away. I do see a threat is startups will come in and they don't have kind of the legacy architecture. And so it's a threat, certainly on the software side of it, but just the position and the foothold that the major providers have today, I don't see it completely going away, but they have to change the way they do business. I mean, SAP is a great example, and they're slowly changing, but it's a speed thing. And so how do you move fast enough? I think the data analytics, I also think the user experience. If I look at the usability, a lot of the tools out there, they're horrible. I mean, I'm sitting there, it's like, that's a crappy experience, and I don't want to use it. And I'll sit down with users, and they're like, oh, God, if I have to use that, I'm going to quit. Right? It was the most recent immersion we had last week or whatever. And so I think the usability and the experience, if you start with that end user and make it better for what they do, is where they need to start. But you know, I think they got to change the way they do business pretty quickly.
I'll agree to the first part of your response, which is speed to value, but I wouldn't necessarily agree to the usability and the UX experience, because that's not JDA for the people out here. But what's more important here, your question was tied around ERP, and I don't want to bring ERP and supply chain complementing areas together, and they shouldn't be seen in the same pedestal. ERP will have its day, and it has had its day primarily because of systems of records. You want a static data to look into. And where the change is happening is supply chain planning to a large extent was dependent on that structured data. But with IoT's edge and cognitive computing based on the data that we get, it is not relying on that structured data. We're trying to harness, ingest, process, and get something out of the unstructured data, for which I do not need an ERP. So there will be a need for ERP when I have to look at historical analytics, but if I want to be forward-looking, cognitively looking at what's going to happen, ERP cannot give you an answer for that. So I need to be able to, I need both the parties, and I can't do this alone. So I will be looking into ERPs of the world selectively for a sliver of data, but the bulk of data in my planning world and the execution world and the control tower that we talked about is going to come from the stream of unstructured data, for which I need my partners too. So that's my answer to you. You got to be, it's an evolving game for companies like JDA as well.
Thank you. We had a question on the app. There's a lot of references to needs for updating skills, reskilling to kind of keep up. Can you give some examples of what some of them might be? I mean, is it software coding? Is it analytics? I mean, what does the supply chain manager of the present and future really need to be on top of?
So from our perspective, I think the machine learning and kind of what I call the quasi-data scientist kind of a person job is becoming very, very appealing to us. The problem that we find is either you have people who are fresh out of college, they know every possible algorithm, regression, where they can talk with PhDs, but what they're lacking is the business context. So how can we take our existing workforce and really set an example where they, as I talked about the nature of job, the nature of work is changing. That's been one area where we are investing heavily to bring that knowledge of the process, of the business, of the customer, and apply in the context of the modern tooling that we have. And the good news is, if you are motivated, you go to Udemy, you go to any of these MOOC courses, for $10, you can buy the best possible course. So the opportunity is there. I challenge my team every week when I talk to them, how much time you spend outside reading what's happening? Are you putting 4 or 5 hours at least a week of nothing but your job, but outside of that? And I think that kind of brings the point home that it can really give you the leg up in the new world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll just add to that, definitely on the data analytics side. So on my team, I own data analytics kind of as a service across our business at Ryder. And yeah, that is a challenge. You'll hire a data scientist that they love to work on algorithms, but they can't even communicate it back to the business, and that's not going to work. I do see that as a hot industry. So I've been trying to get my kids, my daughters in college, to kind of switch their major into that. It's just not working. They're not good at math at all, so that's not going to work. But maybe parts of logistics and trucking may work with them, or maybe marketing. No, that's one, but I guess 2 other points. One is just the shift towards agile, right? So we're going through this whole shift, and it's not just the engineering or the technical part of agile, it's the engagement from the business, the product side of it, but it's also the experience piece. So the UX, UI is critical. Whether it's developing it ourselves or just engaging with the business, it's a change for how we launch our capabilities internally and externally, and that engagement is, with customers, with all the different users and stakeholders to bring them into the process. And once you do that, you see the value and you see them participating, but then they own it as much as the product team as well. And so that's a big change for us internally as well as externally.
Completely agree with both of you. I don't have anything much to add. I think besides in the days that we are tied to digitalization, again, these are some commonly used terms in the industry, and you will have 10 to 20 different definitions within the same company or outside those companies. I think you need more of vision, creative engineering, out-of-the-box thinking, not to take away anything that you just said, which is business context, skills with technology and skills to adapt to the machines, all those are great. But there's going to be immensely a lot of need who will truly contribute, be it through visions or through creative engineering and communication, but you can't leave it to the machines, right?
Fantastic. Well, I think that's a very good note to sort of wrap up the panel here. I want to thank everyone again for their collaboration time. Before you go, can I just give you a quick heads up because the format of the conference starts to shift a little bit now. First of all, please join us for lunch, hosted by our sponsor Landstar. So we'll all be back towards the sponsor area, just next door to there for lunch. And then after lunch, we're breaking up into a number of small groups. So we're giving you quite a lot of choice here. Session 3A, which will be in this room, that's called Tomorrow's World Today. So that's looking at some of the changes coming in the future. That's 3A, will be back in this room. Next door, in the B room, will be one of our 3 ideas labs, which are actually quite interactive workshops. The format will be kind of laid out more specifically in each session. But next door is Automotive IT supply chain workshop, ideas lab. That's next door here. And then we upstairs, so on the floor 5, you can either take the escalators right here up 2 levels, or you can take the lift, the elevator. We have two ideas labs up there. In the Marquette, we'll have this marked for you and stuff, but in the Marquette is on cross-border and trade. So that's the Ideas Lab Cross-Border and Trade in Marquette. And next door in Joliet is the Packaging Ideas Lab. So again, we'll have it marked up there, but just so you know, that's those 2 on floor 5, back here for in these rooms for the other ones. Thanks again to our panelists. Thank you all for your participation. Enjoy lunch.